So we've gone through it. Did you watch it?
Not yet, Drew. Not yet.
Okay. I did. I watched it. And I A-B'd, first of all, this...
You have the Universal too.
Yes.
You have the Universal one.
Yeah, and I looked at them both. Okay. I'm with Paul. I'm with Paul. He talked about how this is not the same transfer. This is not the exact same transfer as the Universal transfer. It has a higher bit rate. It has different color timing. It is a better transfer. It is a better transfer. Now, here's something I wanted to talk about in terms of a little bit of movie knowledge and understanding about how certain things used to be done. Now, first of all, I want to talk about what is an interpositive. Okay? In filmmaking, you have the original camera negative, the OCN. Then, when movies are turned into theatrical releases, like we're talking non-digitally shot films, photochemical movies, what they would create is what's called an interpositive. And they would make release prints from an interpositive, because you don't make, when they're making 3,000 prints of a movie to go to, now everything's done digitally. But when they were making prints of movies, you don't use the original camera negative, or at least you shouldn't, to make your release prints, because the negative gets damaged. So they would make what's called an interpositive to print. So for all those people that talk about, I went to the theater and I saw this movie when I was a kid, and on home video it looks different. Yes, because on home video, usually they would go back to the original camera negative. So especially things in 4K and stuff like that look better than it did even in the theater, because you're not one step away from the original negative. The transfer is being made off the original negative. Now, if you could, we would all want our transfers made off of the original camera negative. With Star Trek The Next Generation, they went back, the movie was, the episodes were finished on videotape, which would not fly, so they went back to the original camera negative and rescanned everything at 2K, and that's what we see on Blu-ray. Obviously, in a perfect world, everybody would go back to the original camera negative and transfer from the original camera negative. Now, with movies, up until the digital era, you would cut the negative. So a film would have a cut negative. They'd actually cut the negative, put the negative, a negative cutter. It was a person, human being, that would cut the negative, glue it all together into the negative that is the film. Now, everything from your optical credits, so when you saw the credits, sometimes you'll see credits in older movies and they look dirtier. There's like pieces of dirt. Yeah. That's because they were shooting either through an optical printer or on an animation stand or something like that. It was all photochemical. And then you had a negative, it was all glued together. That has changed since the 2000s. So what an interpositive is, just to make sure that everybody understands this, an interpositive is a positive image on film stock that's used to make duplicate negatives or printing masters. It's an intermediate step in the process of creating release prints of film. You make the interpositive from an edited camera negative. It's a positive image on negative film stock, and the orange base of the interpositive film gives it special color characteristics. It protects the negative from wear and tear. It's used to make duplicate negatives or printing masters, so you don't have to touch the original negative. It's used to reproduce deteriorating still negatives, and it's used to make color inter negatives. Now, there are also digital IPs, okay? So, when movies are made now, say, I don't know, Kill Bill. So what happens in the digital world, Amélie was re-released earlier in 2024. Jean-Pierre Jeunet went back and restored Amélie, but there's no 4K of it. There can't be a 4K of Amélie because it was finished digitally. It was color graded digitally. So what they don't have, there is no cut negative of Amélie. Yeah. It doesn't exist. There's only, they would scan the negative, the original negative as it was shot, and they put the entire film together rather than cut pieces of negative, physically. They finish the film digitally, and you can output it in various ways. It can be a file. Tango Shalom was, in fact, shot digitally. There's no negative for Tango Shalom. It doesn't exist. A lot of movies that have been shot in the last 25 years do not have original camera negatives. So when you get a movie like Amelie, in order to, first of all, Amelie was heavily color graded. The color grade is not really part of reality. They spent a long time color grading that movie. Now, if you wanted to create a true 4K version of that film, you would have to go get the negative, all of the negative of Amelie. You'd have to figure out what scenes and takes you used, scan it all, again, which is incredibly time-consuming and expensive, because you have to have somebody go in, get the negative, find it, put it up on a scanner, scan it shot by shot. And then you'd have to regrade the film. You'd have to start from scratch and color grade the entire movie. It would never look exactly the same as the version that you could get it close, depending on how much time you wanted. But there's no way you could go back and duplicate what they did, because the tools have changed. Your aesthetics have changed. So in order to make a full, true, new 4K version of Amelie, it would be incredibly expensive and time-consuming. And the question would be, why would you do that if Amelie exists as a 2K master that you're already happy with? Well, the answer is, in our digital world, we'd like a 4K master. But the thing is, there isn't one. There isn't going to be one of Amelie. So the 2K version is the only thing that exists. Is that a bummer? Sure. But the version that they did, Jean-Pierre Genet's new version of Amelie, is the best version of that movie. Now,
to Inglourious Basterds.
We are seeing a lot of people who are up in arms over, say, for instance, we've seen a lot of controversy, the latest being Kill Bill Volume 1 and 2.
Yeah.
Aliens. All these different people are Terminator. A lot of people are talking about, well, now, would it be ideal to go back to all of these movies and go into the original camera negative and scan them at 4K? Sure. I'm saying right now that would be optimal. And then you have to then go back and color grade them all again from the beginning, start from scratch, and redo the color grade. With a movie like, say, Terminator or Aliens. Terminator came out in 1984, Aliens came out in 1986. When 4K first came out, there were a lot of people complaining because not everything looked like a fucking Pixar movie. You have different film stocks, optically printed effects. Ghostbusters. The live action photography is amazing. Now, in Ghostbusters, they shot all the effects in 65 millimeter. So they're when you're looking at optically printed effects, they're easier to deal with. Close Encounters, however, if you look at Close Encounters, there's a lot of effect shots that are heavily grained out because you're looking at optically printed multiple layers of film put together. That's part of the photochemical process. That was filmmaking. Now, with Star Trek, for instance, the original series, they decided, because the visual effects, I think in the original Star Trek, the visual effects are great. The space shots are great. They have a reality to them. But when they were put on Blu-ray, the optically printed effect shots look incredibly dirty, superimposed with the beautiful live action photography, because they went back to the original negative. So kudos to Paramount when they were smart and didn't make swill like Section 31. You got to have two versions. They redid special effects and CG, but they put the original versions on so you would have both. Now, when it comes to movies like Kill Bill 1 and 2 and Inglourious Basterds, or Aliens or Terminator or whatever, they've already made certain transfers. They might have done upscales. There are versions that already exist, like Inglourious Basterds. You can have a transfer, whether it was done at 2K, 4K, whatever the transfer was done at the time it was made, like the Kill Bill movies. They exist in a certain way. Now, you can take whatever that original master was and re-encode it. You can take that master and you can do an HDR pass on it, which wasn't possible when it was originally done. In the case of Tango Shalom, there was new software. Some of the material was shot in a Blackmagic camera. They had made new software from the time it was shot, so I went back and re-encoded and transcoded the original footage, and they had better software, so I had a better color space to work in. That was because it was 6 years from the time the movie was shot to the time we finished it, so I was able to avail myself of new tools. So when you're looking at a lot of these movies, a lot of people will just bitch about how come it's not a new 4K transfer. A lot of people are just you're never going to do that. You're never going to go back in and go into that original camera negative and find each piece of negative and recut. Who's going to pay for that? You know, and who's going to do it? If Quentin Tarantino has finished Kill Bill 1 and 2 and they're perfect in his mind, how are you going to get him to go back, retransfer all the negative, recolor time the entire movie, basically take it all the way through post again, if he's already happy with it? How are you going to convince him to do that? Some people will. And some people, you know, whether they do it well, The Godfather's original negative was so deteriorated that Steven Spielberg paid money, said, I'll pay for it. And they had to go fix the negative. And when you look at negatives are damaged and things like that, because it was, you know, for whatever reason. So it's a film. It's not because the studios don't want to make it the best it can be. With like The Searchers, they go back and they correct the negative. Sometimes even soundtracks are missing. They might have missing shots. There's all kinds of things that haven't been stored correctly. So people should understand, like, I thought that the Kill Bill 1 and 2 discs looked great. Now, would they look better if they transferred them off the original camera negative in 4K? Yes, but that isn't an option. It's not an option. And people are like, well, why don't they go back and who's gonna put up the cash? And does Quentin Tarantino want to do that? And Sally Menke, the original editor, passed away. So what Arrow did with this was they did a new encode of a previously existing master. And I think they did a pretty phenomenal job. Might this have looked better if there was a cut negative that they would scan from and make it a true 4K transfer or whatever? I didn't look. I A-B'd. I think the color is better and the blacks are better. And the encode is better. So this is a better version of the movie. Now, there's a lot of people say, well, I don't see any difference. That's okay. You might not see any difference. I will tell you unequivocally there is a difference. You can look at it you can look at the bit rates. You can make color. Paul did a great job. Twinflix did a great job showing the difference. And you can see the difference is pretty subtle, but it's there, especially if you are watching it on a properly calibrated TV. So I just
especially the blacks were way better.
Way better. They were way better.
What I saw in the pictures. Yeah.
Way better. And I watched them both. You know, I kept going back and forth. And you know, I was flipping between I calibrated both. My HDMI inputs are between my multi-region player. I was going between my multi-region player, my Sony multi-region player, and my Panasonic main player. And I was just clipping between the two, looking at, and one is a better transfer.
And like you said, Rob, in the 2000, when we went to the digital era, a lot of movies were just shot in 2K.
Yeah. That's the thing. The early Marvel movies were all finished. FX-heavy movies were finished in 2K because 4K was too expensive. I mean, you're looking at the resolutions. Every frame costs a ton of money to render, and when you have a movie done in 4K, it's that's what happens. But it gets me angry when I have to deal with everybody bitching and moaning and complaining all the time. I'm like, look. There is no other option. And then the other case with the James Cameron films is, like, I think Terminator looks amazing. If you had
they did find the right balance with the Terminator.
I think so too. Now, does it look different than its theatrical release? Yes. But if you were to go back to the original camera negative of Terminator and just do a transfer, the film grain, it's all over the place. The miniature effects and the special effects are much different. What they did was they've given us a new version. Now, as a purist, I want it to look like it did when I saw it in the theater. But even the theatrical version is from an interpositive. You're not seeing what it looks like directly from the camera negative. You're seeing something once removed. So what you're seeing now is a lot of this technology. If people saw what an original camera negative transfer would look like, they would bitch and moan and complain, why are the visual effects shots so grainy? Why do the film stocks look this way? Things are just different. I think, like you said, what they do with Terminator, the movie's never looked better. And it looks more updated. Look, we've talked about Aliens. I've got the Blu-ray of Aliens. I can go watch that. But this new version of it is pretty amazing. It's a different experience. And for me as a purist, I would not have chosen to necessarily go that way.
We changed our minds, Rob. We were changed with our minds.
Changed.
Because you were already bitching and complaining about it on Instagram. You put the old one, where's the new one? But for us, it worked.
It worked. Now, do I think True Lies worked? No, I do not. No. And I think True Lies, it would have been better if they went back to the original camera negative. And now everybody, look, AI is just another tool. I mean, when people talk about, as soon as you're moving into the digital world and you start, you can make things sharper focus. You can, the Lord of the Rings, watch my little color grading featurette on the original Lord of the Rings special features. They were able to go in and isolate people's eyes. They could make I mean, Lord of the Rings is a movie that looks nothing like its original camera negative. Nothing. It's very, very different because everything is heavily affected. The color grade on Lord of the Rings is extreme. The elves, they slowed things down. They all kinds of stuff. So it's a different world.
Nice.
But look, damn fool idealistic crusader, his channel, he bitches and moans and complains a lot. And he's not wrong. There's a lot of things like, why can't you find the original mono track? Well, a lot of times those things are missing. People like mono track, who wants them? Well, the 5 people that do, I mean, I want them, but, hence the end of my...
Would you, Rob, hand on heart, would you listen in mono with that great Dolby Atmos track that it has?
Fuck no.
Fuck no, exactly, Rob.
No.
Exactly.
Look, here's the thing. Dolby Atmos did not exist when they made the Terminator. It was a low-budget movie. They could. I think the original was probably mixed in stereo. Was there 5.1 then? I mean, Next Generation, they went back and they did a 7.1 mix on Next Generation. If you asked me to go back and listen to the 2-channel stereo mix, I'd say no.
Because you always have that great hum of the engines.
Yeah, I mean, and they've given you a sound field that's, look, a lot of the time you still need, I don't think what they did in Tim Burton's Batman is necessarily good. You have to have talented people coming in and doing it correctly. But there's been a lot of stuff, a lot of advances in home video. Like, look, I really appreciate David Fincher coming back and making sure 7 looks the way it looks, and he didn't use the 7.1 home video mix. He went back to the original 5.1 and brought his sound mixer, who did the original movie in 5.1 the way he wanted it when he originally made it. So I like that. But then there's people like, where's the 7.1 mix? Well, they didn't put it on there because David Fincher didn't want it there because that wasn't the way it was done originally theatrically. So it's all up in the air. It's all, There's my editorializing for the day.
It's not.
Anyway, yeah, there you go.
Is this your Rob, or do you have more stuff, Rob?
I have one more.